Hello, my name is Aiden Maxwell, and this is the beginning of a 4-part video series I'm doing with hopes of giving a little bit of a more personal explanation of climate change to just generally inform people on the process overall and to help maybe change some people's minds about whether or not it's an important issue and a real issue. So this is the first episode of the 4-part video series, and this episode is going to focus on why climate change is important and why humans should be responsible for it. Why are we the ones that should do something about it as opposed to the Earth just naturally taking care of it, or it just being a process that everything will adapt to. One thing that I think is really important to understanding this issue, and was something I initially questioned when I found out about climate change and people were talking about, is it a real issue, is it not a real issue, is it really caused by humans? So a lot of the times you will hear people say that climate change is natural and Earth's climate has always been changing as long as it's been around. And this is true. The climate of the Earth has changed drastically over the course of its life, and that's just part of what happens. However, it is also important to understand that the recent changes to Earth's climate are not so much part of the natural cycle as all the other changes that have happened in the past. And really what these changes, these drastic changes, are due to is humans, and mainly we can see that this change started happening during the Industrial Revolution and afterwards. One famous graph that actually depicts this process happening is known as the hockey stick graph. This graph shows how the average global surface temperature on Earth has changed over time. And one thing that's really noticeable is that there is a drastic spike. The rate of temperature change is going along at a pretty steady rate, and it is going up, but when we see more technology, more industrialization happening, there is a sharp spike in the temperature increase that is occurring. This graph was one of the biggest things that convinced me that it is actually a human-caused problem. It kind of directly shows that there was a sudden change, especially on the timescale of how the Earth changes, which usually will take thousands of years for processes to happen, that humans have had a very significant impact on this change in global average surface temperature. Now, I know I'm kind of just jumping in here pretty quickly, but one reason for that is I kind of wanted to explain why this is an important issue. So just for a little bit of background information, average global surface temperature is basically just an average of the temperature across all the globe. It sounds kind of self-explanatory, but it is important to understand as it is one of the biggest things that's used to track climate change and track how our planet is being affected. So this change in temperature is clearly a pretty big effect that humans have had on the Earth. Now, another one of the main reasons that people tend to write off climate change is that they think it's kind of more of a problem for future generations, that it's not really going to affect anyone anytime soon, so it's not important for us to currently worry about it. But that's actually not true. There are many people that are currently being impacted by the various effects of climate change. One such example of one of these groups of people is the Quechua, which is an indigenous group of people that live in the Andes in Peru. One important aspect of the Quechua's people way of life is that they depend heavily on glacial meltwaters to supply them with the water that they drink and use for agriculture. As the global average temperature has been rising, one of the biggest effects is much more glacial melting occurring. So these glaciers that would normally replenish over the winter and then supply fresh water to the Quechua are now much smaller and cannot provide as much water during the hotter months of the year. As the need for water grows more dire for the Quechua people, they find themselves running into many obstacles in their daily lives, such as lack of clean drinking water, inability to supply food for themselves, and many of them have had to relocate or move away from their traditional living places because they simply cannot survive where they once did. Another current example of people being affected by climate change are people living in low-lying island nations. Now, the climate change effect that is hurting these people's lives is actually sea level rise, which is caused by the ice caps melting up in the Arctic, leading to higher sea levels around the globe. As the water rises, these people are pushed away from the lands they've always lived on as the salt water intrudes into the land, and even their homes and properties are completely flooded. So as you can see, there are already people being affected by the impacts of climate change. This is not some problem for future generations. There are real people out there that are already struggling and having to uproot their lives because of the effects of climate change. So these people are already experiencing many negative impacts in their lives, but it's not just places far away. Even here in the US, there are issues that people are starting to feel the impact of. Now, I live in the Midwest, so here we are lucky to not have very many worries about water security, since the Great Lakes are right next to us and they provide us with tons of fresh water. However, in the western part of the United States, it is quite a different story. Water is much scarcer there, it is much drier, so there are many conflicts over water. Who has the rights to water? Buying out people's property just to get the groundwater beneath them. And while there may not be too many effects in the Midwest right now, there certainly are some coming. It gets pretty hot here during the summer, and those temperatures will only increase, leading to more deaths from heat stroke and dehydration and things like that. Also, as the climate changes, crops are not going to be able to be grown as availably. So certain things that we've always taken for granted may no longer be available to us, which could affect people literally everywhere. So I hope this video helped to give a little bit more of an understanding on why humans should be a little bit more worried about climate change than we currently are. Not only did we cause it, at least the drastic rates that it's happening at currently, but there are many effects that will severely impact all of us. So giving this issue a little bit more thought and concern could really help everyone out in the long run. That basically wraps up everything I wanted to talk about for this video, so be sure to tune in next time. The next video is going to focus in a little bit more on the specifics of climate change and what processes cause it and what humans are doing to exacerbate the problem. Thanks for watching the video, and be sure to leave feedback. I really would like to hear everyone's thoughts on these issues and the way they were presented, so feel free to leave your opinion, leave your thoughts in the comments, or make your own posts. Do whatever you want. Just make sure you get your opinion and thoughts out there. Thank you.